My grandfather.
Your grandfather. Wow. That's closed out. Oh, this is a rare treat. It's Ellen Freckleton. We have a letter here from Jessie Huff, who is the same age, and she's asking about Ellen Chapman. It's her maiden name. They graduated from Lincoln High School together, and she saw our brochure and she said, I also know that the flat dairy wagon tipped over at our back corner of the fence about 1909. The horses went right by me. They were just going a bit too fast at the corner. Well, let's see. Well, Dad worked at the finance department of Tacoma for 33 years. Before that, he was manager of the NT lumber mill and yard. And before that, he had a grocery store at Center and M Street. Horn and Home was at Center and M, wasn't it? Ellen? Was Horn and Home at Center and M Street? Horn and Home, the grocery store?
I know the name, but I can't picture it.
Okay, well, anyway, the grocery store went broke when the panic hit. No one got paid, so neither did the grocery bill. But Jessie Huff, just an old schoolmate of Ellen, so. Boy, we're glad to see you here.
She was the chairman of the reunions so often, and then when we stopped having reunions, I lost track of her.
Oh. She didn't quite lose track of you.
I'm glad she didn't. I'll get her address from someone.
Helen Hipkins, right there. We'll get.
Hi, I've got her phone number.
Yeah.
She can copy that number and give it back to me.
If you want to see in the letter. Now our membership chairman, the club whip, I think.
No, that's still Donna's job.
Oh, okay.
I'm not pushing you. I just want to know if there's anyone in here that is not a member. Would you please raise your hand so I can give you one of these? Everybody in here is a member?
No, I'm not, but I have already have one.
Oh, great. Okay. I'm Donna Cable, and my name is the one that you send memberships to. It's on back here with my address. Is there anyone that would like to take some of these for handing out to someone? They'll be on the
Do you
table.
have any extras I need?
Sure.
For my group. For my group. Maybe about 5 or 6.
All right.
I want to give you
That's
Jessica.
Okay,
Jessica.
fine. Thank you.
We have a new treasurer, and she is the manager of the Continental Bank, which has taken over the Seafirst, little Seafirst building across Driveway Lake Drive from Clover Park High School. Her name is Sue Bogazuski. There's that, Mark. Well, but I never get it right, according to her. She goes by Sue B most of the time. Anyhow, she's a great gal, and because the bank is changing its name, she just gave us a bunch of the Continental Savings Bank pens, so they're about to be extinct. Now, last night, Glenn and Sue and I went to the meeting at the city of Lakewood, and we got a proclamation. We're officially recognized. It reads so nicely. Whereas it is recognized that the city of Lakewood has its own unique cultural history, and whereas the citizens of Lakewood have banded together to protect that unique heritage, and whereas the city of Lakewood supports the citizens' efforts through the Lakewood Historical Society to educate and preserve historical locations, artifacts, and records, and whereas the city of Lakewood acknowledges the importance of the efforts of the Lakewood Historical Society, its members, contributors, and friends, now therefore I, Bill Harrison, Mayor of the City of Lakewood, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby recognize the Lakewood Historical Society as a valuable organization to promote cultural and historic interests of the City of Lakewood. Proclaimed this 17th day of April, 2000. So, that's about the third time I've read it now. I still kind of like to hear it. And if anyone is at all curious about Sue B's name, she's got a few cards here. She's a...
Is she here tonight?
Pardon?
Is she here tonight?
No, she's not.
Oh,
Well, these, you know, the people are so busy. Now, the people at Lakewood City Hall, most of them are having a meeting tonight. And I don't know what meeting Sue is going to tonight, but
I just wondered which one she was here tonight, so.
yeah. Well, we'll get her here.
We'll get her.
Now, we have some more of the brochures. If you want to put them out somewhere where they'll do us some good, that would be fine. I guess the box is in here now. Well, I'd like to introduce Drew Crooks. Now, I spent an afternoon with Drew, with Richard Densley, our former treasurer, and Drew, on the way down to see him at Lacey, I was thinking of questions to stump him. Things I'd wanted to know, like who was the original Hudson Bay person that started the farm at Fort Stilicho? Well, that man didn't like it. He stayed about a year and he left. So, but there were a few little buildings left that he put there, so when Joseph Thomas Heath arrived in 1844, he had something to crawl into that night. The sun's coming in and I don't think we can, is it okay?
Yeah.
I know how annoying that is. Anyhow, here is Drew Crooks from the Lacey Museum, and his specialty that I know about is the Hudson's Bay claims on this country here and their life here. So, Drew?
Well, thank you. I'm pleased to be here tonight, and I'd like to have this kind of my presentation in three different parts. The first part is I'd like to talk in just some general terms about Hudson's Bay Company history, and I'm probably going to look into this. I like to talk a little bit. I'd like to talk a little bit about Hudson's Bay Company history in general, just to give kind of an introduction to the subject. Then I'd like to talk about the Puget Sound Agricultural Company, the farming outstations of Fort Nisqually, which pertains closely to Lakewood history. And then the end be open for questions and answers. Well, I guess the first thing is, what is the Hudson's Bay Company? It still exists as a series of department stores up in Canada, but the Hudson's Bay Company originated in 1670. It was a British enterprise. Prince Rupert was the leader when it was created. Its headquarters for most of its history has been in London. Now it's in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And it was created to be a fur trading company in the New World at Hudson's Bay, up in what is now Canada. And its history since then has been complicated, involved, and I don't really want to go into details, but basically since 1821, can you hear me in the back? Okay. Since 1821, with the merger with the Northwest Company, another fur trading company based in Montreal, Canada, the Hudson's Bay Company was active in what is now the Pacific Northwest. They had a series of stations all through Canada into what is now Oregon, Washington, Idaho. These stations were not military forts, they were trading posts. The goal of the company was to get furs from the Native Americans, trade them for goods, supplies, and then send the furs back to London. And they were sold on the London and European market. For centuries, this was quite successful. But by the 1840s and 1850s, the market for beaver had basically fallen out. Beaver hats were going out of style. And so the company, to remain economically important, diversified in what they were doing. They did other types of economic activities. They would send salmon to Hawaii. They collected lumber. They did anything that would make money. And it was about this time, let's say 1838, 1839, the Hudson's Bay Company decided to organize a group called the Puget Sound Agricultural Company, or PSAC. This was completely owned by the Hudson's Bay Company, and it was the same personnel in many cases, but it was to create farming out here in the Northwest. And the two major areas of operation was now a cowlitz farm down near Toledo, Lewis County, and up here at Fort Nisqually. Cowlitz was more farming crops. Nisqually was more livestock. And so by the 1840s, the company was still doing fur trading, but it was shifting into other economic activities. And tonight I'll be talking about the farming activities mostly. The other fact to remember is that from 1818 to 1846, this part of the world was jointly occupied by the United States and Great Britain, so that either country's citizens could come here and live and work. But in 1846, this area was officially divided, the old Oregon country. And the part that is north of the today's international boundary went to Britain and became British Columbia, Canada. The part south became part of the United States. The thing about this is that part of the treaty was that the possessions of the Hudson's Bay Company and the Puget Sound Agricultural Company remained intact until they would be purchased by the U.S. government. And most people, I think, in 1846 thought, well, boy, this might take 6 months, a year to do. Instead, it was finally concluded 20 years later, 1869. And so until that time, the Hudson's Bay Company and the PSAC remained active down here south of the border. Once their possessions were purchased by the government, they went north of the border, and this area was open for American settlement legally, and also many descendants or members of that worked for those two companies stayed and took donation land claims too. So anyway, that's kind of an introduction. Is there any questions about, does that make sense? Okay.
I think the one point is that British Columbia was in fact not part of Canada, but was a separate colony from 49 to 67.
Well, it gets more complicated than that because the first colony was Vancouver Island. And then British Columbia, the mainland, was created in 1858 with the gold rush. And then only later were the two colonies brought together. And then in the 1860s, Canada was formed as a federation. So it was a whole series of steps that led to it. Well, before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the great assistance I received from the writings of two historians, George Dickey and the late Delbert McBride. Furthermore, I wish to thank Jim Forrest, Andrea Hine, Dave Halsbeck, and Rob Whitlam for the help in the research and writing of this paper. Now let's take a look at the past. Archaeologists in their work deal with two basic types of documents or evidence. As Clement W. Megan wrote in his textbook, Archaeology, an Introduction, quote, the first and most important are the material remains left behind by the people. And the second and equally important kind of document is the relationship between objects found in the same place. This context of discovery often provides the only evidence for the use and meaning of the artifact. One interesting example of archaeological context is related to the 1989 excavations of the company employees' houses outside the 1843 Fort Nisqually. And I probably should mention too, Fort Nisqually, there's been 3 Nisquallys. The first Nisqually was almost like a cabin right by the mouth of the Sequalejoo Creek as it goes into Puget Sound.